She asked me why they were staring. I told her people just get curious about new faces, but we both knew that wasn't true. All I wanted was to buy her something small, something she could keep. I didn't know that walking into that store would change how she looked at the world and how I looked at mine. The door sighed on its hinges as they stepped inside, letting in a slice of cold air that dissolved beneath the warmth of chandeliers. The marble floor held their reflection like still water. A tall, tired man in a frayed jacket, a little girl in scuffed shoes gripping his hand the way you hold onto a railing in a moving train. He bent toward her. "Just a look, birthday girl," he murmured, as if saying it softly could make the wish cost less. Light spilled across glass cases where metal and stone glowed like small suns. The girl's eyes went wide at the sparkle, then flicked back to her father's face, measuring permission. He nodded once. She relaxed, but only a little. The first laugh arrived like a clink of ice in a glass, small, dismissive. He didn't turn. Years of hard days had taught him that attention feeds mockery. Still, the sound slid under his skin. Another voice, louder, said something about being lost, and he felt his daughter's fingers tighten. He squeezed back, steady pressure. "I'm here." He guided her to a nearby case, pretending to study the neat parade of necklaces. His breath fogged the glass for a second. He wiped it away with the cuff of his sleeve, then caught himself and drew his hand back. Careful now, precise, as if the wrong gesture could set off an alarm. "Daddy?" she whispered, her mouth close to his coat. "Why are they looking at us?" "Because we're new faces," he said, keeping his voice light. "People get curious about new." He tried to smile. It held for a heartbeat. A pair of heels clicked to a stop behind them. He felt the stare before he heard the tone, sweetened for customers, sharp for him. He didn't turn. He focused on the way the chain links caught the light, pretending comparison, pretending choice. Beside him, his daughter leaned in, her breath a feather on the glass. He remembered the envelope on the kitchen table with its unpaid stamp, the grocery list with lines through the essentials. The birthday he had promised wouldn't feel small. He had told himself a store was just a store and a person was just a person. But here, under the chandeliers, the scales felt tipped. "Maybe we can pick something simple," he said to his daughter. "Something that means we were here together." She nodded as if the word together were the item on offer. More laughter, farther away this time, emboldened by distance. He straightened, shoulders settling into a calm he wore like a uniform. "We'll be quick," he said, mostly to the air, partly to the girl, partly to the idea that he had to earn his place by leaving faster. The girl rose on her toes to see better. For a moment her face forgot the room and its watchers. He watched that moment like people watch dawn, a quiet proof that light still arrives. Then the voices pressed in again, and he felt the decision land. They would stand, they would look, and they would not apologize for existing among bright things. He lifted his chin, just a fraction, and nodded toward the next case. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's find your sparkle." He had planned to leave after the first display, just long enough for his daughter to see the shimmer she'd dreamed about. But pride, quiet and stubborn, kept his feet planted. The laughter that began as scattered notes now rippled through the room, growing bolder with each whispered remark. A pair of women at the counter leaned toward each other, perfume heavy in the air. "Maybe he's here to pawn something," one said under her breath, but loud enough to sting. The other smirked, eyes gliding over the worn collar of his jacket. The father said nothing. Silence had become his best armor. He shifted his weight, one hand steady on his daughter's shoulder, guiding her toward another case where smaller, humbler pieces rested, rings with faint scratches, a single pearl necklace that didn't glitter so hard it mocked you for looking. His daughter traced the glass with a fingertip. "This one's pretty," she said, pointing to a thin gold band shaped like a heart. Her voice, hopeful and fragile, cut through the air like a bell. He wanted to agree, to tell her they could have it, but the price tag staring back at him said otherwise. He smiled anyway. "It is, sweetheart. Maybe we'll find something just like it." Behind them, a laugh snapped like a twig. "Don't touch the glass, please," a saleswoman called from across the room. Her words were coated with politeness, but the tone carried warning. The girl froze, pulling her hand back as if she'd burned it. The father turned, meeting the woman's eyes with calm that wasn't calm at all. "She didn't mean any harm," he said evenly. The woman gave a thin smile and busied herself arranging a tray that didn't need arranging. A man in a tailored suit nearby raised an eyebrow at the scene, then bent toward his companion to murmur something that made her giggle. The sound filled the space between every heartbeat. He could feel his daughter's confusion rising, her world still soft, untrained in cruelty. "Are we not supposed to be here?" she whispered, the words barely air. He crouched down, level with her eyes. "We belong wherever we walk," he said quietly. "Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." The words came out firmer than he intended, a promise shaped by years of swallowing insult. She nodded, but her small hand trembled when it slipped back into his. He straightened, breathing through the weight pressing behind his ribs. A display light flickered above them, catching in her hair like a spark. He looked around once more, faces turned, whispers resumed, and made a choice that felt both simple and defiant. They would stay a few minutes longer. If the world wanted a scene, it could watch them stand with dignity. He had planned to stay silent, let the moment pass, and leave with some trace of pride intact. But silence, it seemed, was invitation. When one of the saleswomen, tall, red lipstick too bright for her expression, finally approached, she wore a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. Her clipboard was more shield than tool. "Sir," she began, her tone slow, deliberate, "these pieces are quite valuable. We try to maintain a certain atmosphere here." He understood what she meant, even if she didn't say it outright. He gave a single nod, his face calm. "We're just looking," he replied. The woman's eyes flicked toward the girl, whose gaze lingered on a row of silver bracelets. "Of course," she said, the words tight. "But maybe the children's section downstairs would be more appropriate. We can escort you." "That won't be necessary." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, steady as a low drumbeat. The laughter and murmurs nearby thinned for a moment. He turned slightly, placing himself between the woman and his daughter. "We're not touching anything. We're just looking." Her composure faltered. The smile twitched and hardened again. "If you could keep your distance from the displays, please," she said, and signaled subtly toward the security guard at the far end of the room. The little girl looked up, her eyes wide. "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" He crouched down, forcing a gentleness he barely felt. "Not one thing, sweetheart." He brushed a stray curl behind her ear, his hands steady even as his chest burned. "We're just looking for something small for your birthday, remember?" The guard began walking over, slow, unhurried, confident. Each step sounded like judgment echoing off marble. The father stood, straightening his shoulders. The instinct to leave tugged at him, but the stronger instinct, the one that said don't teach her to shrink, kept him in place. The saleswoman folded her arms. "Sir, if you'd like to make a purchase, I can show you something more accessible." She gestured toward a corner case where trinkets sat like consolation prizes. The father met her eyes. "You think I can't afford this store?" he asked, not angrily but with quiet weariness. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Silence spread, uncomfortable and sharp. The guard hovered, uncertain now, waiting for a cue. The daughter's small hand found his again. He felt her pulse fluttering in her wrist, fragile and trusting. He drew a long breath. "We'll just be a minute," he said firmly. "And then we'll go." The woman hesitated, then stepped back, her authority bruised but intact. The guard lingered by the entrance, pretending to adjust his earpiece. The father turned toward his daughter again. "See that necklace?" he said softly, forcing his voice back to something normal. "The one shaped like a little star? Reminds me of when you used to draw them on the fridge." She smiled faintly, comforted. For the first time since entering, she reached out, hesitant, brave, and pointed to it. "It's pretty," she whispered. He nodded, proud of her courage, even in this moment of humiliation. But before he could say more, another sound sliced through the tension, a deeper voice from behind them, calm, authoritative. "Is there a problem here?" All heads turned. The owner had arrived. The room shifted as soon as the voice spoke, low, even, and used to being obeyed. The saleswoman straightened instantly, her confidence folding into deference. The guard stepped back, hands clasped behind his back like a schoolboy caught in the wrong hallway. From the archway emerged a man in a tailored charcoal suit, silver at his temples, calm in every motion. He didn't raise his voice, but silence fell around him as though the walls themselves listened. The father turned slightly, shielding his daughter without meaning to. "Mr. Vance," the saleswoman stammered. "We were just—" "I can see that." The owner's eyes moved across the room with slow precision before landing on the father. There was something deliberate in that look. Not suspicion, but study. The kind of gaze that measures more than appearance. "Sir," he said evenly, "has someone made you uncomfortable in my store?" The father hesitated. Pride and exhaustion tugged in opposite directions. "We're fine," he said quietly. "My daughter and I were just looking." The little girl peeked out from behind his coat, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were just looking for my birthday." Something softened in the owner's expression. "Is that so?" He took a few measured steps closer, lowering himself slightly to the girl's eye level. "Well, happy birthday, young lady. And what kind of treasure are you looking for today?" The girl looked uncertain, glancing toward her father as if asking permission to answer. He nodded. "Something shiny," she said finally. "But not too shiny. Just something nice." A small, genuine smile appeared on the owner's face. "A very good description," he said. "The best kind of gift is one that feels like you, not the one that tries to outshine you." The staff stood frozen, caught between embarrassment and fear. The saleswoman's earlier confidence had drained away, leaving only a blush of guilt and a trembling hand that fussed pointlessly with her clipboard. The owner straightened again, his tone now cool and formal. "Ms. Hill," he said to her, "I believe I heard you offering to escort this gentleman out a moment ago." Her lips parted, then closed again. I was concerned about policy, sir." He raised an eyebrow. "Policy?" She swallowed. "About maintaining the atmosphere," he finished for her. "Yes, I heard that part." His eyes didn't leave hers. "Tell me, does your policy also include humiliating guests in front of their children?" A hush spread, sharp and clean as broken glass. The father shifted slightly, uncomfortable with being defended but unable to deny the small relief that crept into his chest. "Sir," he began, "there's no need to." But the owner lifted a hand. "There's every need," he said quietly. "This store was built to serve people, not to judge them." He turned back toward the father and looked at him a long moment, his brow furrowing, as if memory tugged at something just out of reach. "Forgive me," he said. "Have we met before?" The father shook his head. "I don't think so." The owner tilted his head, studying the man's face, the steady eyes, the rough hands, the quiet dignity that didn't fit the role others had assigned him. Recognition flickered there, faint but growing. He didn't say it yet, but he remembered the gas station years ago, a storm, a stranger who had stopped to help him change a tire while the world drove past. It was him. And now the story was circling back. The owner stood still for a long moment, letting the silence carry weight. The soft ticking of the wall clock filled the space between them, and in that quiet, memory clicked into place. He finally exhaled, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "It is you," he said quietly. The father frowned, uncertain. "I'm sorry." The owner took a step closer, his tone gentler now. 3 years ago, Route 14, outside Brookside. My car had blown a tire in the rain, and no one stopped for an hour. Then a pickup pulled over. A man climbed out with a flashlight and said, "Let's get you out of the mud before it swallows us both." That was you. Recognition spread slowly across the father's face. He remembered that night, the cold rain, the stranger in the suit, the handshake under the broken streetlight. "You didn't tell me your name," he said. "I didn't need to, but I never forgot yours." The owner's eyes softened. "Ethan, right?" The father nodded. "Ethan Miles." The saleswoman, Ms. Hill, shifted uncomfortably. The color drained from her face. Around her, the other employees pretended to busy themselves, but guilt hovered like humidity in the air. Mr. Vance turned toward them. His voice lost its warmth. "So this is how you treat a man who once pulled a stranger out of the rain? You see a worn jacket and decide his worth." His tone didn't rise, but each word landed with the precision of a blade. "No, sir," Miss Hill murmured, her eyes low. "I don't finish that sentence," he interrupted. "You've already said enough." He looked back at Ethan. "I should have known sooner. I'd been looking for you for years, to thank you properly." Ethan shifted, uncomfortable with praise. "You don't owe me anything. Anyone would have done the same." The owner smiled faintly. "No, most wouldn't. And kindness like that shouldn't go unanswered." He turned to the girl, who clung shyly to her father's sleeve. "And this must be your daughter. The reason you were brave enough to stop on a dark road." The little girl blinked up at him, not quite understanding, but sensing that something had shifted. "We were just looking," she said again. almost apologetic. Mr. Vance crouched slightly, so their eyes met. You can look as long as you want, he said. In fact, you can choose whatever you like. The sales staff gasped quietly. The manager stepped forward. Sir, store policy. Policy, Vance repeated, cutting her off, is rewritten when it fails decency. He straightened, his presence filling the room again. Today, the only policy that matters is gratitude. He turned back to Ethan. You once gave me a hand when I had nothing to offer. Let me return that favor now. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not why we came. I know, Vance said softly. That's why you deserve it. He glanced toward the trembling saleswoman. Bring them a tray. The best pieces we have. And make sure you remember what real worth looks like. It's not stitched into fabric or measured in carats. The woman nodded, her voice catching. Yes, sir. The father said nothing more, but the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. His daughter's hand found his again, small but steady. For the first time since entering the store, Ethan felt the eyes around him change. Not mocking, not pitying, but quiet with understanding. And the balance of the room shifted back to what it should have been all along. When the tray arrived, polished and glinting under the lights, Ethan's first instinct was to decline. The display looked far too grand, each necklace resting on velvet like a prize meant for someone else's story. He stepped back, shaking his head. We can't accept that, he said quietly. Mr. Vance gestured toward the tray, patient but firm. You didn't ask for charity, he said. You came here to make your daughter's birthday special. Let me make sure the memory matches the intention. Ethan's jaw tightened. I only wanted to buy something small, he said, looking at the jewelry as though the price tags themselves were alive and watching. Something she could keep. Mr. Vance folded his arms, his voice steady but gentle. Then we'll find something that matters, not something that shines. You have my word, it's on me. The daughter looked between the two men, uncertain. Daddy, it's okay, she whispered. We don't need anything. I already have you. The words caught in his chest, simple and devastating. He smiled faintly and brushed her hair back from her face. I know, sweetheart, but you deserve a memory today, not just another promise. Mr. Vance's gaze softened. You raised her well, he said quietly. The kind of grace most adults forget. Ethan didn't respond right away. His fingers tapped lightly against his thigh, a habit from years of doing the math in his head before making any decision that cost more than groceries. I'm not used to taking things I didn't earn, he finally said. Vance nodded once. That's exactly why this isn't charity. Consider it a repayment of a debt long overdue. The staff nearby had grown silent, their earlier bravado replaced by something closer to shame. Even the guard, who had once stood ready to intervene, now looked at the floor as though the marble might whisper apologies on their behalf. The girl approached the tray slowly, her small fingers hovering over the rows of bracelets and pendants. She hesitated, glancing at her father again. He gave a tiny nod. Go on, he said. See if something feels right. Her eyes scanned the glittering spread but didn't settle on the most expensive piece. Instead, she lingered over a simple silver locket near the edge, small, round, and a little less perfect than the rest. Mr. Vance followed her gaze. Good taste, he said with a smile. That one's been waiting for the right person. Ethan looked at it too, recognizing something in its quietness. It's simple, he murmured. Simple lasts, Vance replied. Flash fades. The girl picked it up carefully, the chain cool against her palm. She turned to her father. Can I really have it? He hesitated, still fighting the instinct to refuse, to protect dignity even from kindness. But when he looked at her face, hopeful, earnest, unguarded, his resistance softened. If you like it, he said, his voice low but warm, then it's yours. She smiled so wide it lit the whole glass counter. Mr. Vance gestured to the clerk, who wrapped the locket in white paper and placed it into a small velvet bag. He handed it to the girl with a quiet reverence usually reserved for far grander ceremonies. As she clutched the little package to her chest, Ethan's shoulders finally eased. For the first time that day, his pride and gratitude stood side by side without colliding. Mr. Vance extended his hand. Thank you for reminding my staff, and me, what grace looks like in practice. Ethan took it. And thank you for reminding me not all stories in this world end the same way they start. The man smiled faintly. Some just need the right ending. The girl held the small velvet bag as if it contained something far more fragile than silver. Her fingers traced its edge, memorizing the texture, while the weight of what had just happened hung gently in the air. The father stood beside her, still unsure how to place this moment in his world, caught somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. Mr. Vance watched the pair with quiet satisfaction. "You chose well," he said to the girl. "Most people look for something that shouts. You picked something that whispers." She looked up, curious. "Why is that better?" "Because whispers last longer," he replied. "They're remembered when the noise fades." The staff behind the counters stayed hushed. The same employees who had giggled before now stood with downcast eyes, their postures stiff with guilt. Ms. Hill's hands fidgeted with the clasp of her name tag until it trembled in her grip. When she dared to glance up, Ethan caught her gaze, not with anger, but with something heavier, quieter. A look that said he'd already forgiven her, but she would never forget how it felt to need it. The girl untied the little bag and opened the locket. Inside, there were 2 empty spaces meant for tiny photographs. She smiled at her father. "Can we put one of us in here?" He blinked, startled by how simple the question was and how much it undid him. "Of course," he said softly. "One of us, and maybe one of your mom when you were little." She nodded, satisfied, then reached out to hand the locket to Mr. Vance. "Can you help me put it on?" He took it gently, careful not to let the chain tangle, and clasped it around her neck. The silver caught the light, not blinding, just steady. The reflection shimmered on the marble floor, a small, glowing circle that followed her every breath. "There," Mr. Vance said. "Perfect fit." The girl beamed. "Thank you, sir." He smiled back. "Thank your dad. He's the reason good things find their way to you." Ethan looked down at her, his throat tight. "We'll take good care of it," he said. "You already do," Vance replied. The clerk returned with a small receipt folder, hesitant. "Mr. Vance, shall I?" The owner waved a hand. "No charge," he said simply. "This one's on the house." The clerk nodded and stepped back, his eyes lowered in quiet respect. Ethan exhaled, still uneasy with the weight of unearned generosity. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. Mr. Vance met his gaze, steady and sincere. "You already did. 3 years ago, on a dark road, with no audience and no reward. This is only balance." The girl tucked the locket under her sweater, patting it as if to keep it safe. "It's warm," she said with wonder. "Good," her father murmured. "Then it belongs to you." He placed a hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward the door. The hush in the store followed them, no longer judgmental, but reverent. As they passed the front display, Ethan caught their reflection in the glass, his worn jacket beside her small frame and bright eyes. For once, the image didn't make him feel lesser. It looked whole. At the threshold, he turned back. Mr. Vance gave a slight nod, respect between men who understood gratitude better than pride. The bell above the door chimed softly as they stepped out into the street, the cool air closing around them like an exhale. The late afternoon light had mellowed into gold by the time they stepped outside. The hum of traffic, the crisp scent of rain from earlier that morning, it all felt sharper now, as if the air itself wanted to make room for the quiet that followed them out of the store. Ethan held the door open for his daughter, and when it closed behind them, the sound carried a sense of finality, like the end of a chapter written in both humility and grace. The little girl turned the silver locket over in her hands as they walked. "Do you think they were mad we stayed so long?" she asked. He smiled, weary but gentle. "Maybe at first," he said, "but people change when they remember how." She tilted her head. "How what?" "How to be kind," he said simply. They stopped at the corner, waiting for the light to change. Across the street, people hurried with shopping bags and coffee cups, faces blurred in motion. For once, he didn't feel invisible among them. His daughter slipped her hand into his again, and he realized how light it felt, how steady. Inside the store behind them, the scene remained frozen in a different kind of silence. Mr. Vance stood at the center, his staff gathered awkwardly nearby. The saleswoman, Ms. Hill, tried to meet his eyes but couldn't. "You all saw what happened," he said quietly. "You saw what judgment looks like when it wears a smile." "Mr. Vance, we didn't," she began. He lifted a hand to stop her. "You did. Not out of malice, but out of habit. That's worse." His tone wasn't cruel, just tired. Every person who walks through that door deserves to be seen for who they are, not what they wear. He glanced toward the window where the pair had disappeared into the light. "That man reminded me today why this place exists. We sell jewelry, Yes, but what we should offer is dignity. If we can't do that, we're just peddling metal. No one spoke. Even the hum of the ceiling lights seemed subdued. Outside, Ethan and his daughter reached their old car, parked half a block away. He unlocked the door, then paused, looking at the reflection of the storefront in the windshield. It no longer seemed hostile, just a building filled with people who'd been reminded of something simple. He helped his daughter into the seat. She was still clutching the locket, holding it like a promise. "Can I wear it every day?" she asked. "Every day you want," he said, "but only if you remember what it stands for." She thought for a moment. "That being nice comes back?" He smiled. "Something like that." As he started the engine, he caught a final glimpse of Mr. Vance at the door. The man raised a hand in quiet farewell, a gesture of gratitude that needed no words. Ethan returned it with a small nod. The car pulled away, the engine's rumble blending into the sounds of the city. The girl leaned her head against the window, the silver locket catching the last streak of sunlight before the clouds closed in. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan didn't feel the weight of the world pressing down. He felt balance. He felt peace. In the rearview mirror, the store faded into the distance. Just glass and light now, no ghosts left inside. He reached over, squeezed his daughter's hand, and said softly, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." Her smile was small and sleepy, but it filled the car. "Best one ever," she whispered. And as the city unfolded ahead of them, quiet and wide, he knew she was right.